Hi guys, welcome back to another video. We're going to be continuing United Alliance Institute by Kitty Cat Me on AO3. It'll be chapter 14, The Truth is Hard to Swallow. The summary is Izuku searches for the right answers. I want to remind you all that this fic does contain graphic depictions of violence as well as main character death, though I do believe that's already passed. The knife hit the floor, Izuku's breaths coming in short gasps. Lady Nagant screamed as there was a sharp crack, ripping her hand back. "Are you okay, Izuku?" Pony asked, grabbing him by the wrists and pulling him to his feet easily. "Did she manage to hurt you?" She scanned the bandages on his neck. Izuku numbly shook his head, looking into her soft eyes, her tired eyes. Would his father kill her, like he had killed Madra all those years ago? If anything she said had been anything other than a lie, it couldn't have been true. To kill a Quirk user for no reason, it went against everything his father had taught him, everything he had learned. The weak pave the way for the strong. That is what his father had told him before, wasn't it? But Quirk users were not weak. They were magnificent and beautiful. "Izuku, look at me," Pony ordered him, snapping her fingers. She ordered him. It wasn't a suggestion. It wasn't made out of respect. But if it wasn't respect, it had to be discussed. She had to be looking down at him, but she wasn't. "Breathe," she said softly, holding his shoulders. "You're as much of a monster as he is," Lady Nagant spat, and Izuku glared at her over his shoulder. He went to defend Pony, his friend, before she shook her head. "He isn't a monster," Pony said, pushing Izuku behind her. It wasn't right for her to protect him. He was supposed to be in charge. But he didn't fight, touching his neck softly. He felt like his voice had gone again, his thoughts so muddled. "You don't know what you're saying." Lady Nagant laughed, cradling her wrist to her arm. It was snapped, hanging limply as she did not adjust it. "You're a mutant. That's the only reason he would associate himself with you. All he sees is your quirk," Lady Nagant spat. His hand shook at his neck as he willed himself to do something. Anything. He had a night before his father was back. He had to do something. "I know," Pony said softly, and Izuku paused in his thoughts. "My quirk is all anyone sees of me. You and other quirk users too. I'm more mutant than the others. I feel the judgment, and I know you do too." Lady Nagant huffed, her legs shaking as she put weight into them. Izuku went to grab his gun, but Pony stopped him. "You're going to hurt yourself. Let me wrap your wrist," she offered, holding her hands out. "I'm not trusting a mutant who sides with a Midoriya." She spat his surname as if it was a slur, and every hair on his body stood on end. She was disrespecting everything his parents had worked so hard for, everything he had lived for, been born for. "I'm not taking sides," Pony said softly. She glanced back at Izuku, who smiled, tipping his head. He didn't know what else to do. She frowned, stepping forward to Lady Nagant. "But maybe it's more than just you or him." She sat where Izuku had just been, leaving him in the middle of the room. He didn't feel in control here, in his own bedroom. Even Fat Cat rubbed herself on Pony's legs instead of his. He was nothing without his control. "I'll kill everyone here, starting with him," Nagant promised again, her good hand twitching. Izuku found his voice, grinning at her. "Go ahead. According to you, I don't matter much, do I?" "Izuku," Pony snapped, getting his attention. "Don't you say anything like that." Lady Nagant laughed at the silence afterwards, her smirk making Izuku's hand itch for his gun. "Listen to your pet, Midoriya. After all, it seems to have more sense than you." He vetoed the gun, instead grabbing the knife from the floor. She was still inebriated, her wrist too broken to use. He was the one in control, the one with the power. Pony grabbed his wrist as he got close, twisting the knife from his hand and catching it. "God, you are both acting like children," she yelled. "Izuku, take a walk." He shook his head, laughing at the suggestion. "I'm not leaving you alone with her. Take a walk," Pony ordered, her voice dropping. Izuku stared at her expression, her lips pursed and eyebrows tight. The bags under her eyes and the pale yellows of them. "Okay," he finally agreed, picking back up the knife. She didn't stop him as he put it into his waistband beside his gun, just watching him. "I'll kill you all," Lady Nagant whispered as he opened the door, his keys securely on his neck. Izuku bit his lip, fighting the urge to look over his shoulder at them. He shouldn't do it, leave them alone. He didn't want to risk Pony's life. Or, if she agreed with Lady Nagant. One inside, the other watched the door. Izuku ordered the 2 guards, his voice back to the husky whisper. They didn't argue, did not question him, as it should have been with everyone. He shut the door behind him, locking it. He had to see something for himself. He had to know who was lying to him. He had to know what really happened during that riot. It wasn't there. He grabbed the last filing cabinet, searching through them again and again. The pile on the desk kept growing. Files he had all read and memorized years ago. Every file said the same. Lady Nagant had shot Madara in her riot. That's it. That was what happened, and that's all he knew was true. But something didn't feel right about it anymore. The testimonies from the guards and his father were too identical. Even what Madara had told his father. It didn't line up to how Lady Nagant said she was. There was something more, and he knew it, but it wasn't here, not in any of the filing cabinets that filled the room. He rubbed his eyes, flipping over the files and rescanning the information. Maybe he had just missed something the times he had memorized it, something crucial, that would explain everything. It had to be among the files and collections. There was nowhere else for him to look. He paused, his fist tightening as he got an idea. There was one other place, a place that confidential information got sent. His father's office. His father had backups of all the files and more, things they couldn't risk getting into the wrong hands. He touched his keys gingerly, biting his cheek. He wasn't allowed in his father's office. No one was, but he had to know who was lying to him, and his father would know more than anyone. He put everything back, his hands shaking as he tried to still his thoughts. It was just a look, and his father couldn't be lying to him, so he had nothing to worry about. He locked the door behind him, keeping his hand there before pushing back his shoulders. He grinned, walking down the hall, trying not to show how nervous he was. His father's office sat in the far back of the original building, between storage rooms and a meeting room that never got used. It wouldn't matter much if he just peeked inside. He took his keys from his neck before trying each one. It would be fine. His father's office wasn't guarded, so that no one knew where it was. No one would be down here. He tried the last key, frowning when it didn't work. He had the keys to every room in the Institute, even to the labs and adjoining rooms. His keys should have worked. He touched the edge of the handle, a small thumbprint he had previously ignored, slightly glowing. It beeped, flashing red, and Izuku took his hand back. Why did his father have this? It was clearly electronic, which made it dangerous with the electric users that they had. It's why the entire building was devoid of any true electronics. Even the lights were securely protected on different lines and switches. He tried again, and it beeped red, not unlocking it. His father would be home in the morning, and he would never have another chance to get in. His work would start back up, and the lab needed him. The recruits needed him. His training needed him. He needed it. He would be gone on his birthday, off to whoever wanted him, and then he'd be right back at his father's side as his right-hand man. He didn't have another chance. He had to find out the truth. He took his knife from his pocket, his fingers readjusting on the old, scraped-off glitter hilt. That was another issue with electronics. They were faulty, and they all had a weak spot. He placed the tip of the knife under the back of the fingerprint scanner, the wire loose in the very back. No one was supposed to be back here to fix it. He took a deep breath, and when he released, he jammed his blade up and forward, yelping as he hit it too hard and almost hit his face on the door. It popped open, and he managed to slide his foot into the small opening before it shut him out again. He opened the door slowly, peering into his father's office, the dark room giving away nothing. He stepped in, shutting and locking the door behind him gently. He didn't worry about people coming to the office, but he didn't like luck, and he didn't like trust, and that was all he had to go on now. He didn't bother to turn on the overhead light, instead feeling on the desk for the lamp he had barely seen outlined when he opened the door. It clicked on, filling the room in a gentle white glow that did nothing to stop his chills. He was disobeying his father and mother by being here. He was going against what he was supposed to do. How could he ever expect his father to trust him to help lead when he had done this? He looked back towards the door, touching the cold metal keys on his neck. "I'm okay," he whispered to himself, smiling slightly. He had come too far to go back now. He ran his fingers over the neat desk, a layer of dust collecting on the tips of his hand. He blew it off, pausing as his fingers hit something else. It was black, raised buttons on it that clicked when pressed. He pulled up the chair, pausing before he sat down to stare at the screen in front of him. He had read all the books his mother had given him on technology, and all the books his father had supplied him with about code, but he never had a chance to test them, to actually sit in front of a computer without fear of a quirk interacting poorly around it. His father had promised to teach him when he got old enough and had come back from the wars. He didn't think he had one here, tucked into a back corner of the main building. Couldn't he see and realize how dangerous it was? He leaned forward and touched the small button on the corner of the screen, the computer whirring to life with a white screen. He had never seen the hologram that the doctor had had before, but computers, he had loved the books. He giggled, tucking his feet up as the little circle spun around and around before turning black again. When it finished turning on, it prompted him to input a code, something he didn't have. He frowned, looking around the desk, but nothing was there. He moved a stack of papers, yelping as it fell. He reached to grab it, tumbling from the chair and scattering the papers across the room in the process. Crap, 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 he mumbled, trying to collect them all and put them back on the desk correctly. When he finished adjusting them, he sighed, leaning back on his heels. He turned off the computer, pushing in the chair as he stepped away from the desk. He could do files and papers, but he didn't want to risk making the office more of a mess for a computer he couldn't access, no matter how much he wanted to try. Instead, he left it alone, turning to the filing cabinets on the wall. There were only 2 of them, far less than those in the records room, but the truth had to be in there. Izuku opened it in one try, the key the same as the one used for the other cabinets. He cracked open the first shelf, taking out a collection of files. There were so many that he had to search through. He pushed open the door to the infirmary, trying not to make eye contact with the recruits, though it was hard with how their gazes jumped away from his, focused on their injuries and cuts. There were so many more in there than he thought there should be, most with varying bandages that had been bloodied. If their training regiment was what Izuku had made it to be, it wouldn't be like this. What was happening to all his plans? He jumped as he ran into Recovery Girl's apprentice, her eyes going wide as she bowed and rushed off. He watched her go, scanning the varying stages of injuries again. How many times had Pony been in here? Charge bolt? Dynamite? Any of the number of recruits he had trained beyond their capacity. It was all to help them get better and to protect them. But where did he draw the line? Midoriya, sir, Recovery Girl called, catching his attention. Your mother is in the back. Please leave before the patients get more anxious. He glanced back at the patients, at the way they fidgeted or shifted away from him. Some tightened their fists in preparation. The little boy, 0875, the water user, had tears in the corner of his eyes. He couldn't have been more than 6. A new shipment. What must it be like, to be shipped away from what you knew? He would be shipped away from everything here. Right, he finally said, smiling at her as he walked to the back of the infirmary. He unlocked the door, the cold metal hitting his chest as he stood back up. Mom, he called, pushing open the door before shutting it quickly behind him. She jumped, sitting up from where she had been laying on a cot, an IV stuck in her arm, bruises over her legs. Izuku, baby, I didn't think you'd be here, she said with a smile, moving to stand up. He quickly stopped her with a hand on hers, making her stay seated. When you weren't in your room, I got worried. Yamada told me where you were. He rubbed at her hand, standing in front of her. She started to speak, but he shook his head. He traced her jaw, moving her hair back out of her face as he frowned at her cut lip that had already started to heal. Who did this to you? Did one of the trainees manage to get the jump on you? I didn't know. Izuku, she said softly, taking his hand. I can protect myself. He nodded, biting his lip as he smiled at her with a giggle. I know, but I fell, she said quickly, shaking her head. That's all that happened, sweetie. I missed some of the stairs in the warehouse after the incident with Eraserhead. I'm okay. She repeated the last phrase slower, and Izuku nodded, tightening his hold on her. I didn't, he said softly before pausing. If I had known you had been hurt earlier, I would have come home. I didn't mean to not show up. I'm sorry, Mom. I should have been here. I'm okay, his mom said quickly, sighing. Come, sit with me. She tapped the bed beside her, and he nodded, climbing up next to her. He hesitantly wrapped his fingers in hers, leaning his head on her shoulder. It felt odd, something he hadn't done in years, but there was something so soft and familiar about it, something that made him just want to stay in that room, away from what he had found. The silence didn't last long as his mom pushed his hair from his eyes. Why were you looking for me? She asked softly. Do you need something? He shook his head quickly, sitting back up and clearing his throat. It was painful, but he only bit his cheek, looking away from her and the machines. Their stares weren't tall enough for all this. "How many have we killed?" he asked softly, touching his throat as he tucked his legs up to his chest. He hated feeling as small as he did next to his mom's powerful presence, her steady gaze and strong body. He hated feeling like he wasn't in control anymore, that everything had started to go off the path set for him. "What do you mean?" she responded in a whisper, touching his head. He shook his head, not sure how to answer it, as she started to hum. What did he mean? Death was just a part of being here, of being a soldier and saving hundreds of innocent lives around the world. 0875's teary eyes flashed in his mind, and he shot up, trying to clear the image. That's all it was, an image of a boy, not a soldier. "What did I do wrong?" he asked a different question, tipping his head to look at his mom with a soft smile. "Where did I mess up along the way? I want to fix it. I want to make it right again and not feel like this." She sucked in a breath, holding her hand to her mouth, tears forming in the corner of her eyes. "Oh, baby," she whispered, pulling him into a hug. He felt the way she winced when he hugged back, hands touching bruises under her gown. He wasn't a child, and he wasn't small anymore. He shouldn't need to go to his mom for comfort, to need comfort. "You haven't done anything wrong," she reassured him, patting his hair down. He shook his head, biting his lip as he tried to stop himself from sniffling. He hadn't cried in so long, not even after his voice and Eraserhead. "Nezu, there was nothing to cry about. It was all for the better." "It hurts," he whispered, burying his face further in his mom's shoulder. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I should have looked out for you more." He shook his head, sitting back up as he wiped his eyes. They stung and his hands became wet. He tried to ignore the feeling in his chest. "No, that's not—" He paused, looking at her. "What do you mean?" She hesitated before laughing slightly. "So, how is Elizabeth doing?" she asked, rubbing at her own eyes. Izuku studied her, searching her face before he shook his head. "Don't call her that," he ordered her, taking his hand back. "That's not her name." His mom hummed, flipping her hand over for him to trace the lines and scars. So many scars, even on her hands. "Neither is Pony, dear," she countered. "Is she still doing all right?" Izuku nodded, his fingers hesitating over the silver band on her finger. It didn't budge as he tried to spin it, stuck in place on her finger. "She is good," he finally said, letting go of his mom's hand. "She's still training, and her healing is coming along well." She hummed, nodding. "That is good. She's a nice girl." "Yeah," Izuku agreed. Silence fell over the room as he readjusted, sitting with his feet in a crisscross position. He eventually broke it, waiting as he rubbed his eyes again. "Did you kill her?" he asked, the question weighing over him the longer they just sat there. His mom stiffened, looking over at him. "Who?" He bit his lip, not matching her gaze as he frowned. "Madra," he finally whispered, the name filling the corners of the room like light in darkness. "The first." She didn't respond at first, clearing her throat. The silence was deafening, the noises of the infirmary outside picking up. "Yes," she finally whispered, sucking all the silence out. "I was the one who fired the gun." He nodded, standing up slowly as his body urged him to move, to do something other than just sit there, stewing in his mind. He had so many questions for her, so many questions that didn't seem right or didn't fit in with anything. There was so much he had believed when his father had told him. How much of it was just more lies? Why would they lie to him? He was supposed to take over, to be the second in charge. He needed to know this stuff. "Why?" he finally asked, the simple question, all he could muster. "She was dying," his mother answered easily. "I didn't want to see her die that day. The most I could do for her was let her die quickly, instead of in pain. Her eyes," she sighed, rubbing her own eyes. "I see them sometimes in the dark, when I'm alone or when—" She stopped herself, shaking her head. "I didn't want to." He took a deep breath, refusing to let his emotions get in the way again. He had so many more questions, but so little time. When his father came back, he would lose all his time. "How many have you killed?" "I don't know," she said softly, tucking her legs up beside her, directly and indirectly, sending them out, sending you out. Her breath hitched as she shook her head. Izuku's fist tightened at his sides as he tried to still himself. "Am I different from them?" he asked, his voice rising. "If I was in the way, would Father kill me, just for a more powerful Quirked one? Would you kill me, Mom? He yelled, glaring at her. What am I here? Why all the lies, the half-truths and secrets? Was Nezu right? Are they all right? Izuku, breathe, his mom said softly, standing up. His eyes went wide as he rushed to her side, making her sit back down with a sigh. I know you're upset. I never meant to keep anything like this from you. It was to protect you. What about them? He interrupted. Protecting them. My training plans and food schedules. Why aren't they as healthy as they should be? She shook her head, rubbing her eyes. Izuku, I'm sorry, she said softly. I'm tired. Can we talk about this later? He hesitated before nodding. Right. Of course. He hurried off her bed, letting go of her hand. Get some rest, Mom, okay? I'll figure everything out. He went to walk away, but she grabbed his hand, holding him back. Izuku, she said quickly. He hummed, smiling at her, as big as he could manage. What changed? He hesitated before letting her hand drop, shaking his head. I love you, Mom, he said with a laugh. I'll be back later for you. He shut the door behind him before she could say anything, locking it behind him. Recovery Girl raised an eyebrow, but he grinned, shaking his head as he strode forward into the infirmary and out. She hadn't answered many of the questions he had about everything he had gotten wrong, and he couldn't go back to his room. Not yet. Not with Lady Nagant in there, staring at him, making his skin itch with her words, her truths. Instead, he turned down the opposite hall, heading to the people who could answer his questions better than anyone. Wake up, Izuku whispered, crouching down in front of 9762. The boy shifted slightly, but rolled over, putting his pillow over his head. Izuku giggled, tapping the boy on his back. Wake up, he repeated, a little louder. There was shuffling from behind him, and he turned, his eyes meeting 4465's lack of eyes. He grinned, though he couldn't see it, as he poked 9762. Wake up, he said again, his voice sing-songy and louder for 4465's sake. Finally, 9762 shifted, sitting up and rubbing at his eyes. He yawned, meeting Izuku's gaze before he screamed and flinched back out the other side of the bed. Izuku laughed, bouncing over to the boy now on the floor. Midoriya, sir, he stuttered through titles, standing up quickly and brushing himself off. I was not expecting you. He cleared his throat loudly. I apologize for my behavior. He stood rigid, his hands going behind his back. His black-shaved head had grown out just enough to stick straight up, his stoic face making Izuku giggle. I would like to speak with you, Izuku said, sitting on the bed. He hadn't allowed himself to act like this in some time, especially around the other recruits. But it felt better, more normal for him than to stand like he would by his father. 9762 hesitated before nodding, his eyes drifting over to where 4465 stood with 9775 now watching them. Of course, sir, should I get into my uniform? Izuku giggled, shaking his head. No, that's too much. He paused, looking over at the only other two in the room. The younger ones had moved out long ago. Can we just talk? He asked, trying to sound more like Pony would. She had no issues with any of the other mutants, or levels, not like he did. 9762 stuttered, his eyes quickly passing between all of them. 9775 stepped up towards them, sitting beside Izuku on the opposite side of the bed. Of course, she said softly, with an air that would make his mom proud. What would you like to discuss, sir? 4465 stood in front of them, not saying anything as she seemed to watch Izuku. Somehow, the lack of being able to see her eyes made her stare send shivers down his spine. He pulled his legs up, flashing his knife and gun. He was the one in charge here, and they needed to know it to begin with. Still, he hesitated before issuing a command. Don't call me sir tonight. Midoriya is all right. What? 9762 started before 9775 cut in. Of course, Midoriya. 4465 scoffed, clicking her tongue loudly. Fuck off, she stated, and 9775's eyes went wide as she tried to shush her. You aren't our friend, so don't even act like it. We know your tricks. Izuku laughed over 9775's distressed sounds, shaking his head. That is all right, he said, biting his cheek. Here, how about I use your names as well? Would that make you feel more comfortable? Ashido? She stuttered, making him giggle again. You can call us whatever, 9775, Yaoyorozu said, nodding. We have no say. Izuku hummed, tapping the bed beside him. 4465, Kirishima, hesitated before sitting beside him, his hands tight. Izuku watched them for any chance of switching to his quirk state, but nothing happened as he sighed. What did you guys have for food today? He asked, tipping his head. All meals and in between. Eggs, Kirishima said first. There was eggs and wheat. Ashido scoffed. It can't be called wheat anything. That stuff tastes awful and leaves you feeling worse than before. Izuku giggled, nodding. It is not very filling. That is true. What about lunch? More wheat cream, Ashido said, her voice hoarse. And for dinner, beans and rice. The fuck do you want to know for? She asked harshly. Izuku hummed, biting his cheek as he shook his head. No, that isn't right. You shouldn't have gotten the same diet as for Kirishima did. He requires far more proteins and irons in his food than you do. In fact, you were scheduled for more sugars in your diet. He paused, looking at Yaoyorozu. That's why your quirk has been causing you to have attacks and anemia spikes. You don't have the proper fats and lipids to satiate your quirk's needs. You should be fatter. She looked away, and Izuku could see just how drawn her cheekbones were, how deep-set her eyes looked. Are you just here to mock us? Ashido asked. If so, get out. Izuku shook his head quickly, waving his hands in the air as he giggled. No, I'm just confused. I had a whole meal plan for you, for everyone. We have the funds. Doesn't make sense. Kirishima stared at him, his eyebrows twisting in confusion. You genuinely care. This isn't some sort of training again. Izuku nodded quickly before thinking better and shaking his head. No, well, yes. He paused before sitting up straighter. How did you get here? Before the shipment, he clarified, taking the boy's hands. Kirishima hesitated before nodding. My mom's. He choked on the word slightly, looking away from Izuku's gaze. When my quirk happened, they sent me away. I was with a group. We got raided. I don't know what happened to them. It was so long ago. He took a deep breath, shaking his head as he pulled his hands back. There were gunshots, and I didn't see them again. Izuku frowned, scanning the boy's face. There wasn't anything that would say he was lying. It was the truth. And you? He asked, looking at Yaoyorozu. She hesitated for the first time, and Ashido held her hand tight. The bounty hunters found me with my family. I got called in when I tried to use my quirk to get away. No, Izuku said quickly. That's not true. Your parents gave you to the Institute. They knew it would be the best option, the safest option, he corrected himself. She stared at him as she shook her head slightly, her throat bobbing. Izuku bit his lip, standing as he watched them. He knew the intake stories. Kirishima had been with a band of rebels who had tried to attack a prolific official. That's what the file said. Yaoyorozu had been given up for her own good. That's what the file said. You, Izuku said, directing it at the last person. She shrugged, shaking her head. Don't fucking know. No, nor do I care. I was a baby. Why are you really here? Izuku bit his lip, his mind racing. He had known these stories, had thought he knew them, just like Madara and Lady Nagant. He didn't answer Ashido, 4465's question, leaving the room and locking it behind him. How many lies had his father really told him? Pony, out, Izuku ordered as he opened the door, his hands tense at his side. Pony looked up from where she sat on the edge of the bed, one of his books in her hands. She opened her mouth to say something, but she shook his head quickly. She stood up slowly, her hoofs clacking on the floor as she left with the guard, leaving him alone with Lady Nagant. Finally come to kill me? She asked, opening her eyes from where she lay on the bed. Izuku shook his head, taking a deep breath. I want to go with you. Alright, so that's finishing off number 14. I will get number 15 out as soon as I can, and number 15 is called Off the Island.